Oh, hello there. Good evening, Ghana, for a happy 65th independence anniversary to you, and welcome on The Probe. Earlier today, as I dug into the archives and watched videos of the feats chalked and touted at Ghana's very first independence anniversary under the Osagefo, it got me thinking wildly about what could have been and how very little we have done since then, even after an additional 64 years of national life. Needless to say, just like our gymnastic performance at today's Independence Parade, things have not sailed very smoothly for Ghana these past 65 years, as our country has been beset with numerous failed policies and saddled with back-breaking debt. Today, our economy is almost inextricably tied to the apron strings of the Bretton Woods institutions, partly thanks to our never-ending appetite for importing goods we do not produce here, and on the back of the insatiable vampiric thirst of our leaders for borrowing, for which they have precious little to show in terms of results. We are, 65 years after independence, very dependent on the alms, donations, and goodwill of others to survive, despite having it all. Large swathes of very arable land, many water bodies which we are fast destroying through galamsey, the gold, diamond, bauxite, manganese, oil, timber, and everything else that could have made us great and strong, as our national anthem suggests. But alas, we are not great and strong, and it is no one else's doing but ours, and the choice of leaders we keep electing. Take, for example, the woe-begone Ghanaian Italian Petroleum Company in 1960, which since 1991, after the government of Ghana became the sole shareholder, metamorphosed into the Tema oil refinery. Reflect on that refinery's woes, the piss-poor management, rampant corruption, and sheer failed management of a crucial national asset, and you will see why we are where we are today. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, visionary that he was, started us on the path of energy and overall economic self-sufficiency. Today, we are nowhere near where we could have been, with some parts of Ghana in the 21st century still without electricity. Our new reality as Brent prices keep soaring across the world, and with our own mismanagement, manifold taxes slapped on petroleum products, and the latest add-on, the war between Russia and Ukraine, have made matters even worse. That is why on this Independence Day edition of The Probe, we explore how and why we got here, and what the way forward is as we attempt to dig ourselves out of an energy abyss that threatens to engulf us all. My guests, doyens in the energy sector, will break down the real issues as we share with the world your thoughts on this all-important issue. We're live on Joy 99.7 FM, Love 99.5 FM, myjoyonline.com, DSTV channel 421, GoTV channel 144. My name is Benjamin Akako. Stay with me on The Probe. We'll return right after the break. Welcome back on The Probe as we probe our escalating fuel prices and explore strategies to cushion the ordinary Ghanaian. Now, joining us tonight on the show, we have Dr. Yusuf Suleiman. He is an energy strategist. He joins the conversation. We also have Duncan Amwa, Executive Director of COPEC, as well as Gabriel Kumi, Vice President of the LPG Marketers Association. Let me just make it clear at this juncture, because sometimes, some things come up. We did engage the Deputy Energy Minister, Andrew Ejapa-Mercer, to join the conversation. He agreed to speak with us, but at the last moment, you could call it the 11th hour, something came up and he had to move on. So we did give opportunity for someone from establishment to respond to the issues we're going to be discussing tonight. But let me start with Duncan Amwa. Good evening, gentlemen, first of all. Good evening to all of you.
Ben, good evening. Good evening to your viewers.
Right. It's a pleasure having you. We have some 50 plus minutes to wrap on this, so I want us to be very precise, concise, and ensure that we dissect the issues. Duncan, how did we get here? We've been talking about escalating petroleum prices, and now LPG increased by 5%. Later on, I'll be giving you a breakdown, gentlemen, because I went by an LPG filling station today and I was a bit horrified by what they told me in terms of prices and the differences, let's say, just the past 6 months. But let's start with how we got here, even apart from what is happening between Russia and Ukraine, Duncan. So that was for you,
Benjamin.
Duncan.
Good evening once again. Happy Independence Anniversary. I don't know if I'm still on.
You are, Duncan.
Good evening to your viewers. Yes. So in 2020, the latter part of 2019 towards 2020, there's a global issue called COVID that takes a toll on demand and supply. Somewhere March 2020, a lot of the economies had to now go into some lockdowns that will collapse global demand. That would also see fuel prices drop drastically. That would see finished products also drop drastically. If we recall, the cost of per metric for both PMS and AGO had dropped from the $600 a metric to somewhere around 180. We had at the time sent reminders to the government to remind the government. Those letters I will still make available to you, Benjamin. They turned a blind eye, a deaf ear to all of that. Following from these lockdowns, after the COVID restrictions began easing out, you get economies picking up again. Meanwhile, OPEC had also met and decided to cut back on their production numbers. What that meant was that they were going to force the supply side to meet demand, which had already dropped. And so OPEC will do what they can to drop production numbers. And then you come into somewhere 2021 and prices start soaring. Again, we sent reminders to authorities to utilize whatever options we could have as a country because prices were simply heading south. Then we find out up to a point where things simply begin to get bad. And then finally, the final nail that will probably expose a country that had not prepared for its people is the Russia-Ukraine geopolitical developments. As I speak with you now, Brent is hovering around 118, Benjamin.
And Duncan, we didn't indicate the last time you came through that we were inching towards 120. You made that prediction, and we're slowly getting there, aren't we?
We are just about $2 away from 120. And so, give or take, we are simply going to be in a very difficult space in the coming week as a country. That is also not the only development that is of concern or worry. By close of week last week, somewhere Friday, the city had also inched up officially to about 7 Ghana cedis and exchange to the dollar. You could imagine what the black market figures are.
Right.
I've seen some, forex bureaus even trading at 7.25. So the oil market would definitely be doing around 7.4, 7.5 at this point. There are predictions therein. If you put the numbers together, with crude hitting 120, with the cedi also depreciating probably to about 7.5 like we had projected, you could be expecting your pump prices to be hovering above the 9 Ghana cedi prediction that we had put out there. So,
all right.
So far, so very poor. We've been inactive. Global developments have caught up with us.
Right.
Our leaders apparently have gone to sleep and nothing is happening.
Nothing is happening.
Prices going up.
Okay, so Duncan, our leaders have gone to sleep and nothing is happening. Let me come to you, Dr. Suleimana. You are an energy expert. And looking at where we find ourselves, look at the Tor situation, for example. We have Ituabo, it has faced its own challenges. We have Tor, which has been bedeviled with poor management, corruption, and all of that. How much of a contribution is it to what we are seeing now, even apart from the exchange rate and even apart from what threats there are globally when it comes to gas production? How much of a problem is it that Tor is not refining, is not doing what it was set up to do?
Yeah, thank you very much. And good evening to you and cherished viewers in Ghana and across the globe. And happy Independence Day to our motherland Ghana and to our cherished Ghanaians. We are happy to be with you and on this special day also. Yeah, so that's a very good question. And just to build on quickly on what Duncan put across on the global dynamics, just before I zero into the local issue with respect to Tor. Yes, like Duncan did indicate, yeah, these global dynamics are what is playing out strongly. You know, and as long as you don't have robust internal strategies to be able to, withstand this, international dynamics, you are bound to be hit hard. And it's not only Ghana, it's a global phenomenon. However, depending on the robustness of your local strategies in place, that will determine the magnitude of the impact such, international dynamics will impact as a country. And so if you look at the price build-up, I mean, three things will go into it generally. We'll have the exchange rate, the taxes, the prevailing oil price in the global market. And if you look at all these three things, to the extent that none of these three things is working in the favor of the consumer. So the aggregate of all this, if you look at the exchange rate, like Duncan rightly said, it's not so good. Global prices are skyrocketing. And then, the other component, which is the taxes, which is also, huge on our price buildup. Yes. So what a critical structure like Tor do? Tor, as a critical structure, what it will do is to stabilize some of this in that we have. You do remember these things that I mentioned, especially the exchange rate. If you have a local refinery, if you look at the quantum of hard currency that we take out to import this finished product, if we were to just take 30% of that and then source this locally, that is, if you have to make our refinery robust enough to be able to be efficient so that we can source most of this locally, that component of exchange is going to help a lot, in a great deal. So yes, refinery is an important entity. Of course, we may have a lot of issues with the refinery, but that doesn't mean that the refinery is not profitable. You can imagine that as you go outside to import, the finished product into the country, it is just that we're taking outside.
Right. Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Suleimana, but if the refinery is profitable and we have that giant entity sitting there, is it explicable why we are not using it for purpose? Can you explain why? Is there any reason to justify why we are not?
I don't think we have any reason not to let our refinery run. Number one, two things are currently going. There are two headwinds with respect to the local refinery that we have. Talk, they say. We have external factors and internal factors. Those problems are emanating from these two major conduits. The internal factors undoubtedly are the inherent weaknesses within the refinery. Yes, we do have inefficiencies, we do have inherent weaknesses, but those inefficiencies, if we have a solid leadership in place with meaningful KPIs handed down to the leadership in terms of the MD with some deliverables, okay? Then the MD will be tasked to solve those leakages. I think it is the way to go. The other way around I talk about is the external interference. See,
right.
Get the best
but by external interference, do you mean political interference, for example?
Yes, of course. That's a fact. I would always say on any day that if the refinery is to run, I think we need the strongest leadership from the highest political class. That's a fact. It's a factual.
Right.
If you don't get that kind of leadership from the highest order, maybe from the presidency, that I want the refinery to run, I'm picking an MD. I'm giving the MD free will to operate. I've given the MD this ABC targets with a time frame. If the MD cannot execute that target, I show him the exit. and then you allow the MD free space to operate. I tell you what, look at the last five years. We have changed about five managing directors within the refinery. A critical infrastructure cannot run like that. So yes, first of all, we need a solid leadership, and I'm told that a board is now in place. A board in place with an MD. So what the government needs to do is just to hand down some deliverables.
Right.
All right. The refinery needs raw material. I mean, we're an oil producing nation. It is so not good for a refinery to be down, and when you are asked, you are told that it is raw material that is missing.
Right.
That is not so good. It doesn't speak well of us.
Dr. Suleimana, just a quick one, very briefly for me, in some 10 seconds, so I bring in Mr. Kumi as well, who has been patiently waiting. So looking at where, we find TOR now, and we have a history of this, we have failed to use that national entity the way we ought to. Should we privatize it? Is that what it will take to get, some action? Because since 1991 that we took sole ownership of it, we have failed.
Yes, my good brother, I've always advocated for that. I told you that one of the sources of, one of the conduits for, poor performance in the refinery is internal inefficiencies. And now we need funds in the refinery, undoubtedly. So yes, I will always 100% call for, privatizing the refinery. If not 100%, just give portion to the private hands to manage. Right. And what it will do is that it will inject some bit of efficiency. And then the required capital that we need to inject to bring the refinery back to vibrancy, that will be catered for. So yes, privatization is an option that the government can pick. And I think the high time we do that, the better.
Mr. Kumi, let me bring you in here because we're hearing some very worrying developments when it comes to LPG across the country. In some parts, LPG use has tanked by about 90%. In recent times, you slapped a 5% increment on LPG products, or at least that was the general agreement, and you're going by that. I'll be sharing with you some figures I got from a gas filling station today because I was personally horrified. But how did we get here? And do you feel we ought to be taking or pushing for taxes to be removed from these products so that gas products or LPG can also go down?
Thank you very much, and good evening to your viewers. And good evening to colleagues.
Mr. Kumi, we seem to be struggling with your connection. We'll try to reconnect with you and see whether it can be better.
I think Duncan, as to how we got here.
Okay. All right, so we'll do this. We'll try to reconnect with Mr. Kumi. Mr. Kumi, just hold your horses. We'll try to reconnect with you. Mr. Kumi, is it better now?
Yeah, is it better at the end now?
It's better. Please, let's try one more time.
Okay, all right. I was just saying my colleagues have done justice to the background as to how we got here.
Right.
But we are of the belief that, one, there are too much taxes on petroleum products in general. But we zoom in onto LPG and have been pushing for taxes to be removed from LPG for the past 5 years. We saw this coming because the taxes were put on LPG in 2015 when crude oil price was under $30. At that time, it made some sense for government to put some taxes on it so that we can get some money to develop our country. But what should have been done that as crude oil price was moving up, the taxes should have been also reduced so that by now we should not be having at crude oil price of almost $120 per barrel, we shouldn't be having taxes on LPG because LPG is a very specialized product. I mean, it's for a very good reason that His Excellency the President and the Cabinet in 2018 set a target for Ghana in terms of consumption of LPG. Cabinet has issued directive to Ministry of Energy and MPA to ensure that by the year 2030, Ghana's LPG consumption should double. So that sums up the importance of LPG. But you cannot eat your cake and have it. You can't set such a laudable objective and at the same time, you sit down and watch prices of LPG skyrocketing. LPG is very elastic. It's very highly price sensitive. So the slightest
Right. Mr. Kumi, so you're basically saying that LPG is crucial, but at the same time, we need some of the taxes to be taken off. We've heard the Energy Ministry say that can't be done, that if you ask for subsidies, in the end, you have to pay back. You have to pay through your nose. How do you respond to that?
Yes, we are not asking for subsidies. We are asking for the existing taxes to be taken off.
Right.
We haven't moved into subsidies yet. We want LPG to be sold at cost. So you don't pay any subsidy, but you don't put any taxes on it. I mean, we have some of our West Africa countries like Cote d'Ivoire subsidizing LPG. We are spending so much money in recent time in tree planting, millions of cities to plant trees. What is the essence if we are not able to improve the use of LPG? What is going to happen is that these trees are going to be cut down for charcoal and for wood fuel. The statistics show that LPG consumption is on the decline. In 2019, we did an average of 30,000 metric tons a month. In 2020, it came down to 29,000 metric tons. And last year, 2021, we did 28,000 metric tons on average a month. And from where the price has now, I'm sure by the end of this year, we should be talking about something less than 25,000 metric tons.
So today, I'll just share with you, when I went by this gas filling station in East Legon, one thing I noticed was that people were now, yes, some people were still coming to fill, but for those who were filling, if they would have filled, let's say, 120 Ghana cedis, they would fill 60 cedis, they would fill half or something of the sort. They are not filling like they used to.
LPG is now bought in tots. I mean, why do you think somebody will carry such a metal, such a heavy metal, all the way from the LPG station and go and buy tots? Right. People can simply not afford the product. It's gone beyond the reach of the ordinary Ghanaian. LPG is now more or less a luxury product. Because the ordinary Ghanaian whose monthly income is about 600, 700, 800 Ghana cedis. How do you expect such a person to take about 15-20% of his monthly income to buy just LPG? It doesn't work. There's no way. It's impossible for us to achieve government objective of assessing.
Right. So, thank you very much, Mr. Kumi. Hold your horses for now. Let me just let those of you watching know that in the next few minutes, we'll start taking your questions as well, just so we can look at it from your perspective at home. Because as we talk LPG and their prices, some taxi drivers use it, bakers use it, a lot of industries use it. We use it in our homes, you know. And if we go back to charcoal, for example, we all know the health and environmental impact. But Duncan, as we sit here, we're being told that for those in households especially, we could be looking at over 200 cedis just to fill gas cylinders in a short time to come, that we're going to be purchasing a kilogram. In fact, we are purchasing a kilogram for about 14 or 15 cedis. When you look at these dynamics, do you agree with Mr. Kumi that we ought to take some of the taxes off? Is that the problem? Is that the issue?
Well, Benjamin, in the past, we would have been fighting with Mr. Kumi and his people, ferociously. The thinking was that, hey, you've increased prices and we can't afford. But where we sit today, the Deputy Energy Minister would have, spoken to policy. But the actual people you need to drag, especially to big platforms like yours, is the finance guys. Most of the discussions we are having now borders on finance in economics. Whether the refinery will run or not, whether LPG prices, anything will be done about it, is the finance guys. Unfortunately, when they need more taxes, you would hear all the justifications, the rationalizations, and how quick they often are to get to the public, to play the emotional card sometimes, emotional blackmail. The country needs money and all of that. Yet when the time comes and the people need some relief, then these finance guys go to sleep. Right. Pretend as though they haven't even heard that LPG prices are at an all-time high, fuel prices at the pumps is simply breaking our backs. A lot of people are going to get BP, blood pressure or whatever, now simply from going to the pumps. Because you go in there with 100 cedis that initially could have gotten you some substantial amount of LPG.
Right.
Now you shake the bottle and it's less than half. You know, with the 100 cedis that would have gotten you about 3-4 gallons previously, you'll be lucky now to get 3 gallons. And so people are really under a lot of pressure. Yet managers of the economy would rather choose to talk about e-levy, which is another way of collecting more money, as opposed to talking about petrol prices, which is more of what every Ghanaian, including journalists, you come across journalists who say, look, the cost of us transporting ourselves around to provide that essential service is now double.
Right.
And incomes are not increasing at that rate. So then it is a big problem. It is a big challenge, and I would have been happy to hear the president himself admit today at the Independence Day celebration that indeed something will be done about fuel prices for Ghanaians. But nothing.
Were you disappointed that he did not broach the subject? Were you disappointed? I mean, he's not delivered the State of the Nation address yet, but I don't know whether that was the platform to talk about that.
Of course, we are. You see, right from independence, what is the state of your energy, sector, right? People are complaining about fuel. We sent input memo to the finance ministry for 2022 budget. Something we saw that, okay, if crude should get to $90, what do? There are mathematical scenarios that we put in there. If it gets to 100, if it gets to 110, if it gets to 120, look, the finance minister chose to read 2022 budget, the entire period, without a single line devoted to fuel prices. So are you surprised we are where we are? There is nothing coming from them. They have either no idea or they have all the ideas and don't care and simply sitting on their horses. They should come out now and tell Ghanaians what contingency measures they are putting in place to ensure that if crude should hit 120,
right,
and the city has also depreciated further, this is what we intend to do to cushion you Ghanaians.
Duncan,
we are still collecting from all of us.
Very briefly, before I come in with some questions that have hit our social media platforms, do you then agree with the Bongo MP, Edward Abambere Bawa, who says that, he has filed an urgent question for the finance minister to be hauled before Parliament to answer questions on what measures are being put in place to control the rampaging petroleum prices. Do you agree with him in that move then?
Indeed, it is long overdue. And you hear the rationalization from, government spokespersons on fuel prices. And the rationalization is that, it's a global phenomenon, and so we can't do anything about it. We say to them, that is a big lie. You collecting taxes that you name price stabilization and recovery, it's not a global phenomenon. You collecting taxes that you name special petroleum tax has nothing to do with the global development. You collecting taxes, right, from Ghanaians, double on energy sector. There's energy sector levy, there's the energy sector fund, two of them totaling 69% per liter.
Right.
Has nothing to do with global development. And then again, the global development that you seek to take shelter with is also inuring positively to your economy. You are producing and exporting oil. So it is not as though the developments from Ukraine, Russia, and now Libya also looking likely to go into some civil unrest. Right? It's affecting Ghana so negatively. Your incomes as far as your crude exports is so engorged at this point.
Okay.
Yet you choose not to do anything about the local pump prices, which the people are complaining about. And again, when you talk about it, they situate it within the global context. The city is not a global context issue. If there's anything to be done, stabilize the city, take some of the taxes out. But if you wouldn't do that, go back to where you are getting excess revenue and plug in some of the revenue to where the action is coming from. I'm sure Mr. Kumi and his people can breathe a sigh of relief if you give them some easing down on taxes so that they can also reduce the LPG prices for all of us. But when we are, the Finance Ministry has gone to sleep, like I keep saying. They are not saying anything, and when they come out to Benjamin, I'm afraid the only cliche you would hear is that it's a global phenomenon and prices.
So Duncan,
Benjamin,
right?
The cost of fuel is more than the cost of fuel in the United States. The cost of fuel in Ghana is far more than the cost of fuel in the United States. We
know that in the United States prices have always been dead cheap. We cannot make that comparison, can we? Economically speaking, we cannot make that comparison, can we?
You see, Benjamin, that is an economy that is paying top dollar per hour, right? This economy doesn't. And yet, this economy is charging more for fuel. This same economy is also the one that is giving fuel to Burkina Faso, right? The landlocked countries. They pick part of their fuel from us. Their fuel is cheaper. This same economy, that is now an oil-producing economy, right? Should be ahead of Togo. But as we speak, people are now smuggling fuel from Togo into Ghana because it's more profitable. Your network carried one of the farmer groups, right? Saying the farmers in and around the border are now looking to abandon farming because it is a lot, easier to move fuel.
So stark realities, Duncan, that you're painting. I have to interject here because we have to deal with some of the questions and, of course, bring in the other guests. But interesting picture you're painting. And how is it possible that, we would export to another country and their prices would be cheaper than even we are selling to our own citizens? What is in there? Let's look at some of the questions you've been sending through now. Jason Amo says, for your chamber, do you not agree, and I believe that is directed at you, Duncan, so you'd have to be brief on that. Do you not agree that fuel prices are now out of the reach of government due to the global situation? I think you started addressing that. There's also Barbara Gogo who says, do you agree with calls for the scrapping of some taxes? What will this mean for the cash-strapped government? I believe that question has already been answered. There's Eloame. Okay, so let's do Gabriel Kumi, who says, is that the Gabriel Kumi? I don't think so. We're speaking to him. But he says, for your association, don't you think it's a bit unrealistic to demand that all taxes are scrapped? So that is addressed to Mr. Kumi. All right. Prince Boateng says, what has been the impact of the recent increments in prices on your business? That is Prince Boateng. And Ameuga says, my question is for Mr. Kumi. Has the impact been so dire that you actually plan on laying off workers? That's Ameuga sending in that one. I think I'll come to Mr. Kumi on this. So some of the questions that have been posed have already been answered, the bit about taxes and all of that. But let's look at the one concerning what impact this has had. I mean, have you been forced to lay off workers at your filling stations and all of that? Break it down for us. It appears we don't have Mr. Kumi on the line. But what do you see, Dr. Suleiman? What do you see could be the impact of some of these price changes? And then maybe right before you come in, let me just break it down for you from the filling station I visited today. 3 kg in terms of standard filling is 55 cedis. That is 12 liters. And if you want to fill to the brim, you'll pay about 70 cedis. Now, some 6 months ago, 3 kg was around 35 cedis. It means we've increased by 20 cedis to 40 cedis. That was 6 months ago. If you look at 12.5 kg, which is 100 cedis, or 140 if you want to top up, like fill it, not to the maximum, but fill it up to a bit. This was 70 cedis just 6 months ago. It is 100 cedis now. And if you want to do max filling, that's up to about 90 cedis. That was then, and these are the figures now. When you look at something like 15 kg, for normal filling, you'd be looking at 145 cedis. If you want to top up, 190 cedis. Back then, 6 months ago, per this station, you could have got the normal for 90 cedis and the top up for 125. I mean, I could go on and on. For those who are using this commercially, 54 kg. Normal filling is 580 cedis, between 580 and 600 cedis. And if you want to top up 630 cedis, now some 6 months ago, we're looking at 450 cedis. That's a 130 cedi increment and maximum for 500 cedis. Look at the disparities and tell me, what do you foresee would be the impact of these price changes, since we don't have Mr. Kumi to react yet? Dr. Suleiman.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will just make a comment on that whilst you wait on Mr. Kumi to come online. Yeah, so that's straightforward. That quantum jump is phenomenal, and it's bound to have, massive impact, on the populace, and that's what we are seeing. How do we solve all these issues? Like I mentioned earlier on, three things. These three things I talked about. Taxes are a component of it. All right, and so if you can do something about the taxes, I think that will help a lot. If you look at taxation per se is a double-edged sword. Once you need revenue, you have to also look at the fact that it's a trade-off thing. You have to look at the fact that once you are getting the revenue, what is the impact, on the populace? So if you get revenue to the detriment of the impact on the populace, it's going to amount to nothing, So to the extent that if this continue, it's going to impact consumption of LPG drastically. And I think most of the guys mentioned, and that's a fact, that the dwindling consumption in the rate of LPG is just as a result of the cost. The cost is simply too much. Okay, now let's come back to some of the things that we can do, locally, like in Ghana. Benjamin, we have a local gas processing plant called Ghana Gas. In Ghana, as we speak, we have huge deposit of gas, about trillions of cubic feet of gas. As we speak now, we only have one train in Ghana Gas. Assuming we were able to get multiple trains of Ghana Gas on stream, all right, we're going to make a lot of gas available. And we have that gas locally. It's not that we're going to import it from any other place. If a refinery is running, it's going to churn out a lot of LPG at competitive rates. So it's all about we not getting our strategies right. So going forward, I think what we need to do is the fact that these things are global events. There's no doubt about that. But I just mentioned that they are global events, but you need to use your local strategies to be able to stem them. Right. I mean, you can't just say, I'm in global events, so I sit up to global event to push it aside. Right. That cannot happen. Okay. It cannot happen. So,
let me quickly get to Mr. Kumi, who now is able to respond to some of the questions we have. Mr. Kumi, so you heard some of the questions about what the impact has been, these skyrocketing LPG prices on your workers, on those at the filling stations. In the period of a year, we've had increments of up to 70%. What has been the impact on your work?
Yes, the impact is quite dire. Because we have, as I speak to you now, about 4 or 5 of them are folding up, because they are not making the numbers to be able to get themselves sustained in the market.
So you mean 4 or 5 stations are folding up because it's unsustainable? Is it stations?
LPG companies, not stations. LPG marketing companies are folding up.
Right.
Because I gave you the statistics. For the past 3 years, we've been going down. From 2019, 2022, we go down 1,000 tons every year. And 1,000 tons is a lot. You are talking about over 50 of those huge bulk, 50 of those vehicles that we use to transport LPG. That gives 50 of them gives you about 1,000 tons. So if your consumption is going down that much, you know that you are really, really, really going down. This is the product we are supposed to be promoting its consumption. Now, some of our companies, some of our members have started laying down workers because they can simply not make the numbers to be able to sustain the kind of workforce that we have. And the impact on the environment, I think that one is Dr. Suleimana will be the best person to give us a lecture on that. Yes, all our river bodies are drying up. Ghana's forest is the fastest depleting in West Africa.
In West Africa.
Now, when you go to the north, the 3 northern regions, charcoal is the biggest industry in the northern region currently. So what are we doing to ourselves? they're saying that.
All right, so let me quickly come to you as Mr. Kumi works on the connection. Let me come to you, Dr. Suleimana, because I'll be moving on to Duncan as well. Dr. Suleimana, how much of an impact is this going to have? I overheard on Newsfile, I believe it was Mr. Kumi or one of the panelists, mentioning that he had been traveling on a certain stretch and he had seen cars coming from up north, down south, about 50 of them, bearing charcoal and all of that. No little surprise then that we are the country with the fastest depleting, forest cover in West Africa. What do you think the impact of this is going to be on our environment, Dr. Suleiman?
Yeah, just straightforward. The impact, the potential impact is dire. There's no doubt about that. And why do I say that? If you look at the kind of movement that is happening in the global community, I believe you've heard something they call net zero. Everybody championing net zero.
Right.
Net zero simply means that you have to minimize the amount of greenhouse gases that you emit to the atmosphere to the barest possible means. To the extent that almost every country, including Ghana, we target by 2030 that we have to achieve net zero. Net zero doesn't mean that we're going to be able to stop using hydrocarbon or fossil fuel. But net zero simply means that we have to be able to, we can use hydrocarbon or fossil fuel, but we should be able to have a mechanism that can capture it. And Africa, most African continent, we are tropical zones. Our strategic advantage is the forestry. Once we release this CO2, what we call carbon dioxide, into the atmosphere, the magnitude or the heaviness or the amount of forestry that we have, we'll be able to, it will determine how much this kind of carbon dioxide that we'll be able to capture into the atmosphere. So yes, if you look at most African countries, I think if they want to even talk about net zero, it will even be negative because we don't release that much of CO2. We are not that much industrialized.
Right.
But to the extent that we are gradually gravitating to a point where we use a lot of charcoal. Where would charcoal come from? It will come from a deforestation, pulling down trees. And if you do that consistently, I think it's going to have a dire environmental, it's going to be dire, and the environmental consequences will be dire. And then what we'll see is drastic change in weather pattern. And we've started seeing that. Look at the flooding that we have.
Right.
These are all, result of changes in, environmental conditions that we have. And so going forward, I think LPG was a serious pressure relief for all this. Though we have this forestry available, just to help champion this net zero mechanism. But if we keep on pulling them down, I think it will come to a time that it will be very, very difficult for us. And then even our net zero champion the net zero will be very, very difficult for us. So yes,
okay.
It will impact us negatively environmentally. Yeah.
Right. We'll take a few more questions shortly, but that also bears some dissonance with what Mr. Kumi was talking about earlier, because you're talking about the trees, deforestation, and of course we need to practice afforestation to get some of them back. And at the same time, there was also talk about the fact that we need other dynamics in there, the charcoal and all of that. So I think while we're talking about the fact that we're spending so much on afforestation, the Green Ghana bit, and we know June has been set aside to do that, if we're complaining about how much we're spending in terms of afforestation, then where lies the argument? Mr. Kumi, I believe you said that we're spending money on afforestation and all of that, planting trees and all of that. It is necessary, especially looking at our situation when it comes to the forest cover. Don't you think so? Briefly on that. I think we've lost Mr. Kumi again, but let me quickly look at this coming through from Felix Akabati, who says, it's absurd that prices of commodities, petroleum and services are flying like jets each day. Economically speaking, the government of Ghana should be held accountable. But let me come to you, Duncan. There's a question from Mohammed who says, has anything affected free flow of crude, or the price is just misbehaving because of actions of businessmen and speculation? Russia hasn't cut supplies yet. How do you respond to that?
Well, Dr. Suleimana would have done a lot justice to this, but let me attempt, breaking it down for him. Geopolitical developments, sometimes even normal comments, right, especially from world leaders, would move prices up. And you have a situation where one of the largest suppliers, right, of oil, crude, gas, and all of that, is today in a very hostile position, dropping bombs here and there, taking over another country. What happens then? As I probably heard, the Biden administration is even contemplating laying sanctions on Russia's petroleum supplies. That will hurt them because at the end of the day, OPEC at their recent meeting, which lasted 9 minutes, were very clear. The most they can add by way of output is 400,000 barrels. You are dealing with another exporter who does almost 11 million barrels daily. And so any shaky development as far as the Russian numbers is concerned, we'll see prices surging. And unfortunately, Libya is also coming up with some civil issues. So if Libya's output is also challenged in any way, I'm afraid the 120 we are even talking about will probably be the least of our problems. Some analysts are already looking at $150 a barrel to $200 a barrel. Clearly, geopolitical factors, demand, supply, how much the markets need, how much the producers are able to put on the market will determine where prices go. And as we speak, Russia is not in a very good position to provide a stable environment, especially for Ukrainian crude, which is probably not so significant, but their own crude. EU, Germany is saying it won't have anything to do with banning Russia's crude. But the others are contemplating banning it altogether. If you ban the day, Europe would have to look elsewhere would have been created. These developments, like it or not, would increase prices, especially when a major producer like Russia is currently in a very unstable situation.
Dr. Suleiman, would you like to top up briefly on that, very briefly on that same point?
Yeah, definitely. Duncan is spot on. But what I'll just add is that now we are seeing this projection that they are making. We shouldn't take it lightly. And I just call our local leaders to take it serious and put up, cogent strategies that can withstand this when it does hit. Because before we call for the fact that oil will go beyond 100, but nobody listened. Now it's moving. And what Duncan is saying is it's a reality. It could come. And because of Russian position. Now, coming back to the sanctions. See, these sanctions, US and European Union made it clear that they cannot touch Russian energy sector because it's key to their energy security. This energy security we're talking about, what we don't have here. But most of the sanctions that they have put, now it is now having an indirect impact on even Russian export. Because some of the banks have been they have been taken off from SWIFT. And as long as banks are taken off from SWIFT, some of the traders will do what we call abundance of caution. So they will not even trade, they will not even try to buy Russian crude. So even though they did not ban directly export of energy from Russia from the east to the west part of Europe, I think whatever sanction that they have put in place now, it is indirectly having impact on Russian export. And like Duncan mentioned, OPEC cut even before this incident, OPEC could not even meet their quota. Russia even could not meet its quota of 10 million. As per the OPEC agreement. So this situation is just coming to exacerbate the already precarious situation that we had. And bear in mind, oil prices were already high before Russian incident. And so Russian incident is just coming to exacerbate the already precarious situation that we had.
Right. Mr. Kubi, what would be your call to the major players in this, the NPA, government, and moving forward? Because today it is a 5% increment, but over the course of a year, it has increased by 70%. And research studies have shown that less and less people are using LPG and opting for charcoal, like we've said, with the attendant health and environmental consequences. What would be your call to establishment? Very briefly, in about a minute. What do you want to see?
Well, rather, the first step towards trying to improve the use of LPG in Ghana is for government to take off the taxes. The almost 20% taxes on the product must go. That's the first step.
That's one.
And then we think about ways of even subsidizing the product for our rural folks. Because where the price is at now, it's simply impossible for the ordinary Ghanaian to buy. And now,
did you say we should subsidize them for rural folk? Is that what you said?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, because look, go to the rural folks. You are talking about 150 cedis for one bottle. Go to the rural area, the family that hardly see even 100 cedis a month.
That's someone's salary.
Yes. How do you expect such a family to cough up that money to buy LPG? So the first step is, one, to take off the taxes, and then we think about ways of subsidizing it for the rural folks, so we can improve the use of LPG in Ghana, so we can save our forests, save our river bodies, and eventually save Mother Ghana.
Okay. Let me take another contribution here. It's from Emmanuel, a Ghanaian living in Sierra Leone. He says, it's not really the world price of fuel, it's the weakening of the cedi, which has many other underlying factors. You don't produce as much as you consume. The result is straight. Your balance of payment will suffer. When that happens, your currency will depreciate. Currency depreciation will cause inflation. The fundamentals, no. That is what Emmanuel sends through from Sierra Leone. Duncan, in the short to medium term, how can we contain the situation?
Ben, let the finance minister wake up from the slumber. Again,
he's not told you he's sleeping, has he?
Well, as far as petroleum, economics is concerned, and the dynamics and the impact on both individuals and the economy is concerned, they are sleeping. Because we are not in very ordinary times where crude goes up by $1, $2, and then it reverses. You wake up in a day, it's gone up by $8. And are they saying they are not seeing? Are they saying they cannot hear the complaint by Ghanaians? Again, the cedi is also depreciating, like one of your comments just indicated. So if you have the cedi depreciating, and geopolitical dynamics also working against us, and authorities go to sleep, Benjamin, the effect is what you're seeing at the pumps. If they put in strategies like Dr. Suleimana has been saying, you will be able to contain it.
Right.
The fact that you are in a football match, right, and then a player or two of yours have been shown a red card, any good strategist or any good coach would now deploy, defensively to ensure that we don't get worse than we currently are. Unfortunately, it looks as though for us in this country, the goalpost is empty. And so whatever prices international markets will throw at us,
right,
we'll pass it on to the people, forgetting that the impact on the economy itself in general is very dire. The unfortunate thing is that this government would only realize that impact at the end of the year, when it has overshot its own expenditure.
Right.
So let the sleeping stop. Let the sleeping stop.
Okay.
They'll be able to find solutions within.
Right. Dr. Suleiman, just do 30 seconds on this. I have a final question for you, and then in the next few minutes, we'll wrap the conversation. Dr. Suleiman, 30 seconds on the way forward, short to medium term.
Yeah, short to medium term, I think I've called on this. I've called on this countless times, but I'll still mention it. Ben, if you continue to operate your energy sector or your petroleum sector as segregated entities, as upstream and downstream separated, you're going to struggle. And that's how come we complain when oil prices are going down, and we also complain when oil prices are going up.
Right.
What we should do is to link up the upstream and downstream seamlessly. I've called on this severally. It's not a rocket science. It's simple. You have upstream, you have downstream. When oil prices are going up, you start to benefit at the upstream. And the downstream will burn out. And if you're not able to strategize to link up the two, whatever gains that you are making at the upstream, it will fizzle out at the downstream. And that's what is happening. We don't seem to see that we are gaining from the upstream, but we are doing so. So let's link up, number one, let's link up the upstream and downstream seamlessly. Right. So that any benefit from any of this side can cascade to the other side. Okay. Number two, let's get a local refinery. It's very important. It will help a lot. It will help stabilize the city. It will help bring a lot of employment. And that is short to medium term. We already have a refinery down. Let's reactivate that. And the last one is about the taxes. And the taxes will loop into the upstream and downstream that I talked about. If you look at the SPT came to being because the upstream was struggling. And we brought in SPT to support the upstream. So that is a clear case of downstream supporting upstream. Now it's the reverse. Why can't we just do the reverse?
All right.
If we do that, I think the downstream is simply too hot. We just need to get some of the benefit from the downstream, upstream, and then cascade it in the downstream to cool down the pumps.
All right. Another 35 seconds on this. Today is Independence Day. We are 65 years old. Like I intimated in my introduction, at our first anniversary, I looked at through the archives and some of what we were touting after 1 year. Today we're 65. Recently we had the CEO of the Kufuor Foundation talk about the fact that if we want to go beyond aid, we need people to think. What is your quick reflection on Ghana at 65, as today is Independence Day? I'll come back to you, Dr. Suleiman. 30 seconds, 35 seconds, wrap on that as we draw the curtains on the show. Dr. Suleiman.
Yeah, so it's straightforward. I think our president mentioned severally that we have to move from Gagisbet economy, value-added, taxation economy to value-added economy. We just need to do that. That is simple. That's what we need to do. Whatever strategies that we need to do to make sure that we shift from this taxation into production base. Wherever we find ourselves, is it agri sector, energy sector, health sector, whatever. Let's try to add every little value to the raw material that we have. We are in the energy sector. The easier way is to get your refinery into business. If you do that, so if you move from taxation business to adding value to your raw material, overall, it's going to cascade into positive results for the whole economy. And that would be my take.
All right.
Yeah.
Duncan, 30 seconds for you.
Well, Benjamin, our leaders should stop being tunnel vision leaders. They should look beyond what the next election looks like and look at the next generation. You hear them. They know the solutions. They prepare them. Unfortunately, you don't see much action from them. Everything for some of us begins and ends with leadership. If the leaders were to decide today that the country would need to be redirected and refocused, they will do the same. If they don't, and it's all about let's take taxes here, and people should pay money, and then you pay the money and your roads are still poor. Pay for road fund on your fuel consumed, right? Over the years, the more you pay, the worse your roads get. Pay for Temoyo refinery debt. The more you pay, the more toll owes. Clearly, there's no proper vision as far as the direction of this country is concerned.
Okay,
and
so
that's for young ones like me, is worrying. Benjamin.
Okay, Mr. Kubi, 30 seconds and it's a wrap. Your reflection on Independence Day, 65 years. Are you with me, Mr. Kubi? So I want your brief reflection on Ghana after 65 years of independence.
I mean, my two colleagues have summed it up. What we need now is action. The talks, we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to do that. We've said it all, but we need to act it. We need to put all the things that we have said. I mean, the president, he's somebody who speaks like a very courageous and a very brave leader. But what we don't really see is the translation of those good speeches into action. That is what we need in this country.
All right, action. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Duncan Amwa of COPEC, Executive Secretary of COPEC. We had Energy Analyst Dr. Yusuf Suleiman, and of course, Gabriel Kumi, Vice President, LPG Marketers Association. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. Thank you for joining me tonight on The Probe. Do have a good night.